So uh, today we're going to be looking at Vue.js, and basically Vue.js is a progressive JavaScript framework. It is used to create highly performant uh, web apps, web pages, as the case may be. Uh, Today we're going to be doing a basic introduction into Vue.js. We would look at what the basic structure of a Vue.js app is, and how we can actually progress from that. Now, we are going to be building on top of our vanilla JavaScript class, manipulating the DOM with JavaScript. So we're not going to be going into anything very new per se. What we are going to be doing is changing our DOM manipulation. Instead of doing it with uh, vanilla JavaScript, we would be doing the DOM manipulation with Vue.js. The reason why we're using Vue.js first as an introduction to JavaScript framework is because we can actually teach this progressive in the sense that you do not need, I would not need to make you divert so much from what we have learned, right? I will just basically build on top of what we have actually learned. Now, if I click get started, there's an installation guide. But what we are going to be doing is that we're going to be using Vue.js as a script tag in our page. So I will copy this, and we're going to create. Now I'm hoping that we have our old page. The last one we had. Hopefully this was the last class we had. No, doesn't seem like it was. Was our last class 2 months ago? Okay, so this was the last class we had. I don't know if you saw the screen recording, but the last class we had was using the API of Fire and Ice, which is the Game of Thrones API, to basically make requests and get character information. So if, for example, I enter 001 here, and I click get character information, it tells me the name and then gender. So if, say, for example, I go something 320, it tells me that the character called 320 is Donnell High and the gender is male. So basically, but just to be clear, how many people actually went back to watch the video about this API of Ice on Fire?
I haven't actually.
Okay. I think that video should still be on YouTube. I think I uploaded. It might be this. Let's see. Okay, so let's start today. The last. I just want to be sure.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's JavaScript DOM with fetch. So this is the class where we have the
today's class.
API of
Today
Ice
we are
and Fire.
going to be.
So I will paste this inside our Slack, and when you have time, please go through, because it will be. I will paste it in class notes. When you have time, go through, because it will make it a bit easier to understand how fetch works and what we're going to be doing. But since we were not there, I'm just going to give a quick summary, considering that the last class was a while ago. Basically, what we did was that, just let's go through what the HTML we have here. we have an input. We have an input called. If you could mute your mic, please. I don't know whose mic is not on mute, but if you could mute your mic, that would help the recording so that when we put it on YouTube, whoever is watching would actually hear it clearly. So we have the body, and inside this div we have an input with an ID, JS character number, and then we have a button with an on-click event that says get character info. The ID is JS button. There's a background color, and below we have a div, and this div says there's an ID called JS Game of Thrones GOT character info. Now in the script tag, we declare a constant called Game of Thrones character info HTML, which is the HTML that goes in here. It takes two parameters, name and gender, and then it returns an HTML that basically says the name is this and the gender is this. This is basically what you see here. Now, on click of this button, if I scroll down, on click of this button, we trigger the Game of Thrones character info method. This function is then triggered. What does this function do? This function basically checks this input box, it collects the value, and then it checks if the character, basically here, if nothing is inside, it says throw new error, input box cannot be empty. So if we go to the console and I click this, we should have an error that basically says input box cannot be empty. So let's try to open this in an external terminal, an external view. Oh, pardon me. Okay. I'm going to refresh this. I'm trying to remember, there was a way to actually put this, yes, open in another window. Yep, okay. So we have this here, and then we have this in the window. So I'm going to open the console, and when I click get character info, if I open the console again, where's the JavaScript console? Yeah, we see the error, input box cannot be empty, which is what we have defined here. So when there is nothing here, we put input box cannot be empty. An easier way to actually do this, instead of throwing an error, we can add an alert. And this would be a return, and return alert. So if we save this and we come here and we refresh this page and we click, we get an alert, input box cannot be empty. And if you have a value, we use the fetch API, which is what we studied. And what the fetch API does for us is that it makes a request to this endpoint API of Ice and Fire, and it passes the character number. And then when it gets a response, it sets it to JSON, and then we basically trigger Game of Thrones character info HTML, which is what we have defined here. We trigger this function with the deconstructed version of the JSON that we are receiving here, and then we put it using the inner HTML. So when I put 356 and I do get character, we get Albert Iron and male, which is basically this just imputed there. Now, what we are going to do today is instead of having to, sorry, I'm going to take this out so that we have it a bit more clear. Yeah, so what we are going to do today is that instead of using vanilla JavaScript as we have used here to make this request and render this page conditionally, we would actually use Vue.js to create this page and render it. Now, the first thing we will do is to add the script tag that we copied. Sorry, my bad. I'm going to go back here. And we'll be using the development version so that we can actually see the errors. I'm going to add the script tag here, just at the top. And I would come and do a document dot So I will make a document on load, and let's put this as an alert just to see that this actually is working. And I will refresh this. One moment. Okay. Let's change this and let's say window. Let's add an event listener. Let's say DOM content loaded. Let's alert loaded. Now what we are doing here is to make sure that our page is loaded correctly. So it says the page at this is loaded. Okay, so if I come here and I refresh, we should get loaded. Fine. Now let us make sure that Vue.js is loaded because we have loaded the script. So we come here and I say console.log Vue. By default, since we have loaded the script here, Vue should be available here within the page. So I'm going to refresh that and let us open the console. And if you see over here, we have a function, Vue, right? So Vue.js is now available to us to actually use.
Okay.
Vue.js is now loaded into our DOM by us simply adding this script here. Now we actually have Vue in our DOM. Now, if you look here, we have div, we have button, on click, JS, and we have get character info. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out all of this. One by one, I'm going to comment this out. And I'm going to comment this out. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to recreate this page as a new page itself. So starting, I will come here and I will say constant, let's call this constant main page. No, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones section equals view dot component Game of Thrones let's call this, let's give it a name. I will explain what exactly we're doing here. Name Game of Thrones and the template, I'm going to copy this. Okay, so what I have done here, I'm going to take this out, just let's take this ID out also. Let's take this ID, let's keep this, yeah, okay, so what I just did here is that I created a component, and we will get into what components are. But if you look very well down here, what I have done is that I have just extracted this div that we have here. I've extracted it into some new syntax called component. But we will get into that. Don't bother so much about it now. What we should now know is how to create a new Vue instance. So the way we create new Vue instances, sorry, my bad, that the way we create new Vue instances in JavaScript is by declaring the term new Vue. So remember, when instantiating constructors, we use the new keyword. So how we begin is we say new Vue, and this, what you see here already instantiates a Vue instance on the web page. So we have new Vue, and we start with the key EL. Now what EL stands for here is element. When we create the new instance of Vue, we use it to target an element on the web page. So I'm going to target the element that will have the ID. Let's give this div an ID, and let's call this ID GOT view. And I'm going to take everything out here. Every single thing that we have here, I'm going to take it out. And I'm going to say that our Vue instance should be mounted inside of Game of Thrones Vue. So I will say our new view should target the element EL Game of Thrones view. And I will click OK on that. Here we can now, let's remove this. Let's remove that. And let's clean up our HTML. So let's just have the body. And then we have this div that has an ID view. For now, don't bother so much about const. Let's comment this one out. And now let's look at what we have here. New view, EL Game of Thrones view. Now we have created the new view instance, and we want that our new view instance should target the element Game of Thrones view. Now if we refresh, we shouldn't see anything here apart from what we have in the console. It says you can download the dev tools, but this is not important. We can find that here. So now let's come to this page and let's refresh. Now we don't see anything inside, right? There's nothing visible. However, if we open the console here, we open our body, we see that we have this div called Game of Thrones Vue.js. Now, it tells us that Vue.js has been detected on this page because we have actually added the Vue.js. As you can actually see here, we have added the Vue.js tag. Now, let's say we want to take, let me take this out. No, I'm just going to copy this part. Let's say we want to take this part and put inside this our div, right? Let's put this inside our div. I will uncomment all of this. Now we have our div Game of Thrones view. There's an input called ID. There's a button, and that's it. Now everything inside this view is basically, at the moment, as we have it, is basically an instance. The div is now an instance of Vue.js. So if I refresh this page, we get this. Now when we click this, nothing happens, right? We don't have anything here, which is nice and very good. However, let's try to mimic the functionality we had previously. So previously we had an onClick handler that triggered something. So I'm going to come here, and what I'm going to do is I would say v-on. Now this means view. V basically here means view on, and then we have click. So if you remember previously, what we had was on click. This was what we had previously. Now we are changing that. To allow Vue.js handle it instead of us using the default vanilla JavaScript. Now we say v on click, and then we want to trigger alert a box. No, alert working. Let's use this for now. Alert working. Let's save that. And now if we come and click here, we don't get anything. But if we come here, I'm just going to refresh this, and let's open DevTools. And then I click that, and let's open the DevTools. Right, this is exactly what we needed. So on click of that, on click of this, hold on, I think there should be a way to actually put this doc to right. Yeah, let's put this inside. This is better. Perfect. Now I'm going to refresh this again. Now, like I said, this is now a Vue instance. And when I click get character info, it throws an error. It says property or method alert working is not defined on the instance but referenced during render. Make sure this property is reactive either in the data option or for class-based components by initializing the property. And here it says error in v-on handler type alert working is not a function. So what this tells us is that we have defined a function called alert. We have referenced the function called alert working, but we have not defined this function. So Vue.js is giving us an error. Now in Vue.js, how you define the function is by going to creating a new object inside the Vue instance called methods. And inside methods, you can then define your functions. So let's say alert working. And let's say all we want to do is alert this is working. Now I'm going to put a comma here and then I'm going to click this and let's refresh this page. Now when we click this, we get this is working. Now if you remember, previously when we did the click, if we go back to this method that we had, when we did the click, we first of all checked character. We basically had to get the element, which was this input box, and then checked the value. So we collected the element and then its value. And we had to check if character number, which means if there was something inside this box, then we proceed. If there's nothing, we basically return an alert. Now, how this can be done in Vue.js is very simple and very straightforward, and I'm going to show you. Now, if you look up here, we have this input, which previously what we did was extracting it with vanilla.js, document.getElementById. by ID. We got this, and then we collected its value. However, in Vue.js, we can use what we call v.model, and let us set this to character number. Now, if we refresh this page, we should get an error because we have defined a model on this input that doesn't yet exist on our Vue.js instance. So if we refresh this, we get an error. Property or method character number is not defined on the instance, but referenced during render. Make sure that this property is reactive, either in the data option, take note, data option, or for class-based component by initializing property. Now, Vue.js has something called data, and this is basically used for data binding. So if, for example, I want to bind data on the DOM to the Vue instance, I use the data option. And what we are going to have here is character number, and let's keep it as an empty string for now. And I'm going to have a comma there. Now, if we refresh the page, we don't have the errors anymore. However, now if I proceed to click it, we get this is working. Right, okay. Now, everything within this Vue instance, data properties and methods can be accessed using the this keyword, this. So we have just defined a character number as a V model, and then we have set the data here, character number. Now if I go here and I put, if I go here and I put, to show you the dynamic nature and the data binding nature, how the data binding works. If I go here and I put 356, and let us save this, and we refresh this page, we see automatically inside we have 356 as the value. So what v.model does is that it sets the value of this input box to whatever we set here. Hence, if this changes, if this value changes, automatically it will be changed here. Automatically it will be changed here. And to show how this works, let's have this button do something very simple. Uh, Instead of saying alert working, let's change the value that we have here. Let's increment it by 1 every time, every single time that we click this button, just to show how the reactivity works and how this updates real time, so that you can see. So now, instead of having alert working as a function here, let's reference the character number, and like I said, we reference them using the keyword this. So let's do this dot character, and instead of having this as a string, I will have this as a number since we want to increment it. Let's come here, and alert working will say this dot character number equals to this dot character number plus 1. What we are doing here is that we are saying update this value character number by 1 every time we click this get character info, because when we click the get character info, we trigger this method alert working. So let's change this method now. Let's change the method name and call it increase GOT value, and I will take this and let's change what we have here to increase GOT value, and we'll save it. And now let's make a refresh, and please let's come here, and probably it's better here. Now we have 356. When we click, it increases to 357. We click, increases to 358. We click, increases to 359, 360, 361. How about if we change this and put 400, and then we click 4001, 4000. Okay, that's not. Yeah, sorry, we didn't save that. That didn't work because the input was not declared to be a number. So let's come here and change the type of the input box to be number. Yep. Now let's save. Let's refresh. Let's refresh. Now let's put 400. For some reason, we still have this reading as a string. Okay, so the number is actually increased. Yep. Okay. So this is basically what we call reactivity in Vue.js. You are able to bind data to the JavaScript that we have on the page, and your HTML basically is binded to your Vue instance. Now, before I continue, I'm going to pause, and please, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
None yet from me.
Okay. I remember there were 2 people, so Lucky, no question from you. Chijosh.
Yeah, I'm the one who just spoke.
Okay, okay. Lucky, how about you?
Sorry, I no questions from me as well.
Okay. There's one more person with entertainment as the user. I don't know who that is. Any ideas? Okay. There's one more person who is online, but I don't know who exactly that is.
No, I also don't know.
It's I don't think it's on the Slack group.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but okay, that's fine. That's fine. It probably maybe had something to do with my previous, uh, maybe my previous screen switch that happened. But okay, it's no problem. In that case, let's continue. So what we have here now is basically get character info. Now let's switch back. What we did was showing reactivity in how reactivity works in Vue.js. So you can set the data and you can do the data binding by simply adding the data here and then adding the v.model referencing this data. And from that point, everything that's imputed here would actually automatically be binded to this particular key that we have here. Now let's change this since we wanted to actually get information from the Game of Thrones API. Let's come here and copy our fetch method. I'm going to open this uncommented and I will only take the fetch that we have here. The fetch part of this function, I will take it out so we don't have to rewrite it. I'm going to close it and we will put that here. Now, as you see, we have character number as a value, but like I said, whenever you need to access character number, we do it with this. So this is going to be this, but character number. However, a better way to do it will also be using the constructor that I earlier on taught. So we have const character number, and that should be equal to this. Now, remember down here, we basically checked the value and then returned an alert. So we would just copy this line and bring it up here. And pretty much what we're doing is very similar to the workshop that I'm going to be presenting soon. It's a bit similar, but the workshop is it's quite way more advanced than this. The idea is that you can easily migrate from using vanilla JavaScript or jQuery to using Vue.js, and this is how simple it is. You you instantiate your Vue instance, and then you usually do a bit of copy and pasting of your different methods. So down here, we would add that same we had, and which says, if character number is empty, return alert. And now I'm going to change this character number here. Let's save that, and let's refresh this page. Right. Now, when we get the JSON, name and gender, what I want to do is we're going to have a value here, key called name, it's going to be empty. Sorry, my bad. And we're going to have gender, and it's also going to be empty. Awesome. Now I'm going to come below this div, and I'm going to create a section, and we will call the section, let's give it an ID, sorry, let's give it an ID, Game of Thrones info data. Let's put it as Game of Thrones data for now. Yeah, Game of Thrones data. All right, we have this section, and now in this section we're going to have let's have a p tag, and this now let's have a span instead. Let's have a span, And within the span, let's define a bold and let's say name. And now I'm going to be introducing a new syntax, which is basically how data is actually rendered on the page. So what I'm going to put here is name. I'm going to explain this later on as we continue. And then I'm going to create another span. And let's call this gender. And then let's go add this as gender. And save. Okay, before I continue, does anybody have any idea what this means? Or I just you don't need to know exactly what it means, but I want you guys to tell me by first look at this, what do you think, and with what you know or with what you already know about data binding with regards to get character number that we use here, what do you think this is actually going to be binding to? Just tell me your thoughts. I don't think for now there's no right or wrong answer. Just I want to know what you think about this. Chijosh, let's start with you. Chijosh, if you're speaking, your mic is on mute. Okay, I'm not sure Chijosh can hear me. Lucky, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go with you then. Maybe when Chijosh is available.
I can actually hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Chijosh.
Okay, I've been talking. I actually switched to headphones.
Okay.
But yeah. I think what it binds is to the span. But I'm not sure.
Okay, fair enough. Lucky, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it binds to the results of the name and gender, and it's more like is it like paragraphs or something? It's binding to the information is going to get from the Game of Thrones data. So that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, both are actually correct. This is definitely a span. So this data is basically available in the span, and yes, it actually binds to the Game of Thrones data. So like what we did here, we had a v.model. We had a v.model, and then we set character number, which basically means whatever is set in character number here, whatever we put here, is going to be available inside this box. This is very much similar to what we just did here. What we just did here is that whatever is available within name and gender within our data is going to be imputed here. So let's take a look at this. Let's put Chijosh here and let's put Lucky here. And let's save. And now if we refresh this page, okay, that's not right. Oh, sorry, my bad. That's absolutely wrong. My bad. I forgot I wasn't using templates here. Let's change this to gender. Save. Typo. Yep, okay. So we have this set as the view.model, and let's take this out, and let's change this to an input. Input. Yep. No closing inputs. And let's set this view-model. Let this be name. Wrong. Yep. Okay. Now I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to put this inside the div that we currently have. The reason why this wasn't available, the earlier syntax, was because we put it outside the div instance that we defined for our element, so it wasn't reactive. I'm going to put this here, and I will just put a break to put some space between. And now if I refresh, we have gender Lucky and name Chijosh. Now let's change this back to spans that we had. And we're going to put this inside the span so I can simulate what I needed to show you earlier. And let's take this out. Let's take this out. Let's have a span again. Let's take the gender into the span. And let's put gender here. And let's take this out. Let's save that. Let's refresh. Yep. Okay. And I will add a breakpoint here just to separate both of them. Let's make this 2. Let's refresh. Okay. Now, basically, this is what this double braces that we see here do. It basically interpolates whatever value that you have defined here. So if, for example, we put character number here, it will display whatever character number that we have down here. Now, moving forward, what we are going to do is that when we get this response back, previously what we did was we generated this HTML and then inserted the HTML into the document, meaning we were manipulating the DOM directly. But what Vue.js does is that it creates a virtual DOM where it does this manipulation. So what we would need to do here now would be, instead of saying creating this, what we have here, which was the HTML, instead of creating this HTML here and then inserting it into the document, well, I will take all of this out now, and we will write this in one line. So we say constant, sorry, we say this dot name equals to name this dot gender equals to gender. This is a very interesting syntax that I have never seen in my life before, but okay. Alright, now let us refresh. Let's try to, I'm going to change this not to anymore be a number. Let it be a text value. Let's refresh and let's say 357. I will come here and say 357. Okay, info. Invalid assignment to const name. Okay, so yes, it has to do with that syntax. Yeah, we don't want. We have name Chijosh, and that's what we wanted. Yep.
Is that a comma? I think it's a comma after the D's.
Ah, could be, could be. Let's see. Yes, yes. Sorry, my eyesight is really bad. Okay, thank you. That was a good catch. I couldn't see that clearly. Well, disadvantage of the smaller screens. Okay, now if we refresh this page, we have Chijosh and Lucky. If we do 357 and we get character name Chijosh, that's wrong, gender. Sorry, bad spelling. Gender. Now I'm going to take this off, and we're going to take this off. And here we're going to have this. No, not at all. We have character number. Yeah. So let's refresh this. If we click get character number, input box cannot be empty. Yes. And if I enter character number 357 and I click get character, I should get the character. So let's see what our JSON is. So the log my JSON. And let's refresh that. Let's take 357 again. So our JSON is an object, has a name, has a gender, has a culture. Okay. Then let's log name and gender. Yes. And let's refresh this page. Okay. Let us have 358. Yes, we have name and gender. Okay. Now I want to do this dot name and this dot gender to be absolutely sure. I'm going to have 358 as default here. This dot name is now Eldred code, and this dot gender is undefined. Not. I'm going to have this out. And let's refresh this. That's a very interesting perspective. Eldon Estamont. Seems there is something wrong with. I hope my spellings are correct. Seems like I have spelled something wrongly somewhere. Name. So I'm just going to try to double check and debug it myself. No, not code. Okay, so I'm going to log this at the bottom. Okay, so the values have actually been changed. Awesome. All right. So what we're going to do now is that what we have done now is that whenever we click get character info, the name and the gender that we have defined here are basically going to be dynamically updated. So I will switch this from being a normal gender to being an input box, and then I'm going to bind it to the gender that we have using view.model. This would be gender, and I'm going to disable that input box, and I will do the same thing here. Put an input, and let's set v-model to be equal to name. Let's refresh this, and this should be disabled. Let's refresh that. Let's get character info, and I'm going to come here. Ooh, interesting. Yes, of course. Sorry.